Hey everyone! Today I decided to make audiobooks of my books. It's the Harry Potter crossover with Final Fantasy VII. And yes, I'm using text-to-speech because I'm bad with saying words I can read. Now let's get started.
Cloud and Baby Harry Potter by Ch1-3, aka me on Ch1-3 and Wattpad. Cover by Himi Offshiness. Chapter 1. Something was telling him to go into town, well, more like Aerith nagging him to go there. He really didn't feel like it, but it was Aerith who had woken him up that morning, and thankfully it wasn't Zack. Even though the pair were long since dead, they still had made sure to keep him company while everyone else was resting in the livestream with their loved ones. He wasn't even allowed to join them, as he was Strife, the planet's chosen champion, and because the planet didn't want more Genova cells, the planet had gifted him with immortality so he could save the planet whenever the planet was in danger. Even though the world had forgotten all about the past involving Sephiroth and restarted anew, time continued to move forward even if it had forgotten its own past, and it kept moving forward. Now here he was going to only the planet knows where. He continued on his way until he felt a ping inside his head, almost causing him to crash into a white Vauxhall Vector estate, but thankfully, he caught himself before that could even happen. Thankfully no one was in said vehicle, but something was causing him to look where he was currently at, and his eyes narrowed at an old sign that clearly read orphanage on the building he was in front of. Cloud didn't really like how many orphanages had been really bad for the children. He had seen so many abuse cases involving them. He had also thought they were extinct by now, but somehow this one was still standing strong. Something inside him was pulling him towards said building. He got off Fenrir, taking his keys out before he headed to the doors of the orphanage. Before he reached the door, a skinny woman who didn't look happy and a very plump man who seemed happy didn't have a child with them when they walked towards Vauxhall Vector estate. Cloud couldn't help but growl at the pair, mostly the man. They were obviously leaving a child here. Cloud automatically hated them. People just giving up a child disgusted him, and even more if the child was still an infant. After a few moments of glaring towards the pair, he turned and entered the orphanage. He saw an elderly woman who was trying to calm down a crying child. Cloud felt the need to go closer and help the poor lady out, though if he was honest, he felt a stronger need to care for the child within her arms. It was like he had a connection to the child, unlike with Marlene and Denzel. He had adopted alongside Tifa, who volunteered to help raise Marlene for Barrett together, while Denzel was orphaned after his parents died, leaving him all alone. Cloud had found him and took him in, raising him to be a good man who protect his family and friends. Cloud always felt that Denzel was his little brother in some way and helped him get with his wife when he was wanting Cloud's advice on how to purpose to said wife and for needing help to get his wife gift for their anniversaries. "Miss, do you need some help?" he asked the elderly woman politely. Though he hated this place already, he wasn't just going to take it out on this poor elderly woman who was obviously struggling. The woman obviously was startled by his voice because she turned to face him quickly and almost had dropped the baby. "I'm good. Though the question is, what may I do for you?" the woman asked him with a soft, gently smile as she continued to try to calm the little bundle down. "I wanted to adopt a child and raise as my own. I helped my friends raise their children along with another, and I was wanting to adopt my own and raise them until they no longer need me to care for them." It was half true that he had always wanted a child of his own, but with his sexuality it was impossible. Well, kind of, but he rather not use that materia to swap his gender yet. He wasn't ready for that yet, and he doubts he'll ever be ready. Tifa still teased him about it because he still was not ready, even though he had been living for such a long time and he still wasn't ready. "I would love to, but we only have this one to adopt out right now," she told him, showing the little one in her arms as she did so. "He isn't even in the system yet to get him properly adopted yet. He was just given to me, and I need to get all his paperwork done before I can allow him to be adopted. Not only that, but this place is also going to be closed down next month, and I won't have him ready by then to allow him to get him adopted in time. I'd have to have no choice but to give him back to those people who clearly didn't want the poor lad. If only they would care about him just as much as they do for their own son." Cloud growled under his breath so the poor women wouldn't hear it. It was one thing to get rid of a child, but getting rid of a child just because they didn't like the child over their own was sickening. "How about I help you out?" he asked, causing the elderly women to look at him in surprise. "I can do all the handiwork, fixing things and such. I can even help you get this place the way you want it, but in exchange I want to adopt the child in your arms." To him it seemed like a fair trade, He truly did want the young one and didn't want him to go back to those two people he saw on his way in. Oh, that would be wonderful. The woman's eyes glittered with renewal of hope. I adore children so much and would really appreciate the help. I've been wanting to turn this place into a safe place for anyone who needs it, young or old. Thank you so much. This means a lot to me. And with that being said, the next 2 weeks went by smoothly. He had replaced the flooring, made different rooms such as a huge dining room, kitchen, bathrooms, kids' play area, bedrooms for kids of all ages, bedrooms for women and man, a nursery for babies that was safe especially if they fall on the floor in any way, and lastly the office area where people could check in, make adoptions, or even sign in to visit their family members. Cloud was putting a few more touches to the nursery before going to look at the roof again to make sure that it wasn't going to cave in at any point. Cloud! Coming from the now familiar voice from within the office, which was next to the nursery, Cloud got up from his painting of a golden chibi chocobo. He proudly admits that he still owned and bred chocobos back at his place, though no one knew what they were nowadays. After a few stretches, he left the room and heading towards the office. Cloud smiled to himself. He had been busy repairing everything and took care of little Harry in his spare time. If Cloud wasn't who he was, none of this would have been possible to do by himself within a 2-week time span. He did go home during the weekends to take care of his chocobos and to get a room ready for Harry when he became the official father of the little one. Cloud walked into the office and gave Rosie a soft smile. Her full name was Rosie Black Valentine. She had told him that Valentine was her departed husband's surname and kept it because even though he was gone, she still loved him. Rosie reminded him a lot like Aerith, though she could never truly be Aerith. She still had that same determination to get him to smile even though he was being stubborn at times. You needed me? He asked as soon as he walked into the office through the door, seeing Harry on her lap giggling and trying to speak just like they had been teaching him but couldn't yet, of course, because he was still only a year old and could only babble currently. Yes, tomorrow I'm going to hire a few people to finish the outside and get the roof stable, she told him with a soft smile. Though you won't have to work anymore after today. You already did a remarkable job with the rest of the place in such a quick amount of time at that. You don't need to do any more. You have already done for me even though you didn't have to do it all by yourself. Also, she handed him a few papers and a pen. I got the little one finally in the system and is ready to be adopted. All you have to do is sign these and he will officially be yours. Cloud felt a burst of happiness run through him, but he didn't show it. He already knew what the papers said, but pretended he was actually reading it through, so that she wouldn't think he was rushing through things. He knew that the laws didn't truly matter to him because of who he was, but he had to obey the laws when you adopt children to keep themselves from harm. After a while, he signed his name and handed the paper back to the elderly woman. Everything checks out. I'll get a good few copies and you'll be allowed to take him home, Rosie told him before getting a few copies and giving him one to keep and to prove Harry was now rightfully his son now. Here you are, you can come back any time. No promises. And with that, Cloud picked up Harry and Harry's tiny suitcase, which Rosie had already set up with the things he's been buying for the young one for the past 2 weeks, leaving that place for good behind. After watching the pair leave, Rosie called to her house elf, Tilly. And a small, tiny elf appeared before her, looking rather nicer than most house elves, always wearing nice clothes due to the house elf not liking the pillowcases the others wore and loved being gifted with clothes, and she was only ever upset when given hats because they were too big or too small for her head. Miss wanted Tilly? She asked with a low, polite bow. Yes, I want you to take this to goblins. She handed another copy of the adoption papers to the house elf. Tell them it's important to have since it deals with little Harry James Potter, though his now Harry James Strife on paper. I want them to close any of Harry's money and close off any banks that aren't being used by him or his new father, and only that Cloud Strife can give permission for it to be used. And I'd like it if any money that was taken without permission be put back immediately after his parents had been killed by you-know-who. Yes, Tilly shall go to the goblins for Miss. And with that, the house elf teleported out of sight. Roise looked back outside to see Cloud chatting away to baby Harry, as he put Harry into a makeshift baby carrier in front of his chest, and making sure a blanket was tightly around his waist, though not too tight to hurt the little child. Watch him well, Mr. Strife. He's going to need it. With that, Rosie watched as Cloud took Harry away on his strange-looking muggle motorbike. At Gringotts, Tilly had given the head goblin, Griphook, the adoption papers and told him Miss Rosie's instructions after he had looked it over and taken Tilly's mistress's orders into consideration. He immediately looked through the vault's receipts after Lily and James Potter's death and noticed a lot of galleons had been taken from the vaults that wasn't supposed to get galleons out of them in the first since Harry was a baby still. Griphook growled under his breath. All galleons had been taken out by none other than Albus Dumbledore, the current Hogwarts headmaster. He was going to put a stop to thrift right away and take all of it back, even if he had to take everything from him, including his own home. Not many hours later, all the Potter's things were back within the vaults, and locks had been changed. Griphook even made sure to make extra keys, sending one with a letter explaining things to Harry's new father about things of the current state of the wizarding world and of Harry's situation by Chocobo that Griphook had been secretly raising for such a case as this. It didn't take long after sending the Chocobo away to find Strife. A very angry Albus Dumbledore rushed into his office with the current potions master Severus Snape right behind him. "What is the meaning of this?" Albus demanded, showing papers that he had been evicted from his own house. "Well, we needed to put back the money that you had taken out of the Potter's vaults without permission from Harry Potter's current guardian, and everything was put back that you had no right to take in the first place. Just be grateful that you still have some galleons left and that I haven't reported you to the Ministry for Thrift." Griphook snarled. Goblins hated thieves to the highest degree, and the man in front of him was very infuriating. "I have permission from his godfather, who is currently in Azkaban, for access to those vaults." Albus was trying to sway things towards his way by calming down first and trying to reason with the goblin in front of him. But his word doesn't count now that Mr. Harry James Potter has a new guardian who we goblins respect to the highest of authority, even if he doesn't yet know we do." When Griphook said that both wizards in the room knew, he wasn't talking about Harry's muggle relative, but someone else at this point. "And who is this new guardian of the boy Potter?" Severus asked. If anything happened to Harry was still his responsibility after Lily had passed. He had blamed himself for not protecting her when the Dark Lord had attacked that night she dead, and her son was all he had left of her. If Harry died, he would blame himself for not stopping the Dark Lord that very night. "I'm not allowed to give that information out without the planet's permission, but I can assure you Mr. Harry James Potter is safe, though his last name is no longer Potter, but I can't give you more than that without permission from his new guardian. You'll have to wait until 1991 when he enrolls into Hogwarts a day before his 11th birthday. Now get out of my office unless you, Dumbledore, want to be arrested for theft." And with that, both wizards had left and Griphook could only grin with satisfaction. "I wish the young Mr. Strife all the luck in the world. In the near future, he's gonna need it." Cloud got home an hour or so ago and Harry had fallen asleep on the way there, and right now he was just happy to finally be back home after so long. He was currently in the kitchen working on an attachment seat that can be removed when Harry gets too old enough for it. He was going to temporarily attach it to Fenrir until Harry was old enough to upgrade it to 7-year-old child-proof one. But eventually he knew he had to get one of those cars that had many seats and seat belts when Harry would be 12, because that's when kids start having growth sports like crazy. Cloud also was going to have to build an air pocket so Harry would be able to breathe while riding on Fenrir to get to places and to keep the wind from hitting the little boy's face as he drove around. There was suddenly a pecking sound coming from his front door which got his attention immediately. He wondered if one of his more rebellious teen chocobos got out of the pin area again. He let out a sigh and got up out his chair and headed towards the hallway that led to his front door. Once he had opened his door, he was immediately tackled by a super small golden adult chocobo. Cloud let out a laugh. Chocobos always made him feel happy, and it didn't matter if it was wild or not. They all liked him right away after meeting him only just once. After the chocobo finished loving on him, it allowed him to sit right up. This chocobo wasn't even his, even though he had bred many chocobos throughout the many decades and years he had walked the planet, and this one was completely different from the ones he had ever raised himself. This one was a full-grown adult chocobo, but it was too small to be a natural-sized one, and it was a rare type of chocobo at that, and that's when he noticed an envelope which was tied gently around its feathery neck. Cloud raised an eyebrow first before he checked the said envelope, which made him blink in surprise seeing his name on it, as well had where he would be when he got the envelope. Taking it off of the chocobo's neck gently, he got up off the ground to go get a knife to open the envelope without tearing what was inside of it. Cloud could also feel that there was a key possibly inside of the envelope as well. He could feel it move a little as he headed into the kitchen with the little chocobo following right after him. He walked towards a drawer where he kept his kitchen knives in and pulled out a small steak knife. He used the knife to open the later carefully. Upon opening the envelope, taking out the key and letter out of said envelope, he placed the key in the knife drawer to not lose it while he was reading the letter and put the steak knife back. Looking through his countertops and finding his special blend of chocobo treats he kept in his house, giving the little chocobo some before sitting down at the table and began reading the letter. To Sir Cloud Strife, the chosen protector and guardian of the planet, swordsman and chocobo tamer. We the goblins of Gringotts know of your heroism throughout time. We hold you to the highest authority above all others for what you've done so many years ago and appreciate you for what you've done and continue to do so. But it has come to my attention that you are the new guardian to Harry James Potter, and you have the right to know everything about the boy and why he has that lighting scar on his forehead. I would very much like to explain everything to you in person, but knowing that your home is most likely protected from us magical creatures and those who do not have permission to enter. Though if you do wish to get answers, please send back with my beloved chocobo with your answer. Now for the reason I'm writing to you, Mr. Strife. You're now in charge of all of the Potter's vaults in Gringotts, and when young Mr. Potter turns 16, he needs to go through the inheritance test to see which other vaults belong to him. But until then you have full access to all of Potter's vaults, which is why you have one of the many key copies. Also, we at Gringotts would be very delighted to open a vault officially for you as well, Mr. Strife. You can put your gil and muggle cash in there, as well as other valuables. We proud ourselves of protecting ever valuable item and more. Also, before Mr. Potter is 11 years old, we need to discuss about his future at Hogwarts and the teacher that would help the young one with the boys' schooling. Signed, by the head of goblins of Gringotts, Griphook. Cloud read it over a few good times and was not at all fazed by the fact a goblin had sent him a letter. He had suspected a few magical creatures were able to understand the life stream, but not as well as the Cetras could. He gave the chocobo some pets before getting up to go check on Harry to make sure he was okay. Afterwards he grabbed a piece of paper with a pen from his bedroom. Then he went to check on Harry again before heading back to kitchen, only to see the chocobo fast asleep in one of the chairs. Cloud couldn't help but smile at the little creature. He wrote his response in his own letter, and then he grabbed the sleeping chocobo and the letter that was given to him before heading out to one of his stables. Walking over to one of the empty stables, he put the sleeping chocobo inside before going over to his own golden chocobo. Hey Zell, I need you to deliver this for me. He puts the letter in the chocobo's saddle after allowing Zell to get the scent of the other one and the other chocobo who delivered it. To the person that sent me this one. Now I expect you to bring them to me after they have the chance to take everything in. And when you get back, I'll give you your favorite treat. Zell let out a happy quay. Cloud petted the bird's head before opening the gate to the great wide world out of Cloud's safe domain. The chocobo charged as soon as Cloud had the gate fully opened. Cloud waited until Zell was no longer in sight before heading back inside his home. He wasn't at all too worried about leaving the gate open due to it only being accessible through Zell's stable only. Zell was the closest and loyal to him out of all of the chocobo he ever had. Zell was also the eldest out of his teen chocobos and was the most mature out of them since he was just a baby chick. They had a connection, or the better word for it, a bond that couldn't be broken even from death itself, just like with the others. Cloud had connections with such as his friends and family who are now in the life stream. As soon as he had entered his home, he heard crying upstairs. He jolted as soon as he heard it and quickly bolted up to Harry's room. Once he got there, the crying had already stopped. He looked into the room to see Aerith holding the little child, rocking him in her arms to cause Harry to go back to sleep. Before Cloud could even ask her a very stupid question, he was stopped by a pair of hands covered. His mouth had been covered by hands that wore gloves. By the chest he could feel from behind him, he knew it was Tifa. Tifa gently and carefully led him into his bedroom. After safely being him into his own bedroom, she got her hands off his mouth. Cloud, it's really nice to see you again. It's been so long since we last had the chance to talk together. She smiled at him with a gentle, happy smile. Though I wish it was under better circumstances. She looked away from him towards the floor sadly. Myself along with the others can't be with you anymore. This absolutely shocked him. He hadn't thought that they would never leave him in any way. His mind wandered to very bad negative thoughts. What do you mean? He asked her, a bit worried about her and the others. Mostly he was scared that it was his fault they were leaving him. Well? She let out a sad sigh before looking up at him again. The planet has chosen us to be reincarnated. The others were born last year minus Red in their new families. Red was born this month and about my own. She paused for a moment, probably trying to gather her thoughts together before speaking again. Well, mine is currently in a hospital due to being forced into a coma due to my body being too small for being premature. I'm only able to see you because my baby self is in that coma. When I go back, I won't remember you or anyone else." Then she suddenly gave him a huge hug. "I'm so sorry, Cloud. I wish I could stay here with you alongside with Zach and Aerith. I don't want to forget anything about you." She wailed out as tears started to pour from her eyes. Cloud didn't know what to do. His mind was trying to remember when he last saw the others and how to comfort Tifa. He did want to hug her back and give her the comfort she needed, but he knew couldn't touch her as only she could touch him. Only Aerith and Zach were the ones he could touch without going through them, though it did take some time for him to get used to it. "Tifa, even if you forget me, I won't be alone." She moved away to see his face to see if he was being serious or not, but in this case, he actually was. "I still have Aerith and Zach to make sure I don't drown in my sorrow ever again like before. But not only that, now I have a son of my own who can also keep me grounded. And if by any chance we ever meet each other again, I'll make damn sure that we are great friends again, just as we are now and forever. If by chance you do, remember you'll always be my friend no matter what happens. And even if I did do something stupid, I'm sure Zach will be drilling into me for days for it. So, you have nothing to worry about. Go enjoy your new life. You as well as the others truly deserve it." "Thank you, Cloud." She softly spoke to him, kissing his cheek like she used to when she was alive before pulling away from him. "I needed that, Cloud." And just like that, she disappeared within the green and white light that he knew was from the life stream. He knew so well that he had the need to cry, but he refused to do so. He needed to be strong and not show how heartbroken he was about letting any of his friends go. "Cloud, it's okay to cry." Cloud quickly turned around. Lucky for him, being immortal, he didn't get whiplash. Upon turning around, he could see Aerith smiling softly at him while holding a sleeping Harry in her arms. "I can't dash," Cloud began, but he was slapped hard in the shoulder and turned around into a rock-hard chest, causing him to let out an oof. "Don't you dare say you can't. I know you can, and you will, Spiky," came the all-too-familiar voice, and Cloud could feel himself being dragged, most likely to his own bed. "Hey, Aerith, I'll get Spiky here to let out his pain. You take care of the baby while I'll take care of Spiky here." Aerith let out a giggle at that. "Alrighty, you better take good care of him, Zachary Fair." After that little bit of teasing, she left the room to watch over baby Harry, soon to be a 2-year-old toddler. Though she would never admit it out loud, she was a little bit jealous of Cloud having all of Zach's attention almost all the time. But she knew the two needed each other due to suffering they had been through together and couldn't change it if she even could. She wouldn't do that to Cloud. She knew that Zach only saw Cloud as a little brother, but she couldn't help but think there was more than what Zach was telling her, or it was just only the jealousy she was feeling. She just didn't really know. Even if Zach told her he loved Cloud, she wouldn't stop him from doing so. She'd let him be with Cloud and still be there when they needed her. That was her job after all. Aerith slowly walked back into Harry's room and placed the tiny baby in the crib gently. Then she hummed him a soft and sweet lullaby. She had always wanted a child of her own once, and now she had many in the life stream that were taken away too soon by so many things. Though she did feel bad for what happened to his parents, only she knew what truly happened to the boy's parents since they weren't even in the life stream. This is why Aerith didn't like those wands those wizards and witches had in the first place. Wands weren't a bad idea at first, but when wizards and witches learned a spell to kill others with it was all bad. The person that had been killed by said wands is stuck in the wand until said wand is destroyed, or the magic fought with the same spell that evenly matches it, but that is only if the person who casted the spell had evil motives or not and couldn't pass on to the life stream peacefully until they were freed. Which is why Aerith hated wands. They could do wicked things. If only she was able to get through to Tom's mind and change his views that death wasn't all that bad, then things wouldn't be as they were now. If that idiotic old wizard tried to help the poor boy out of his abusive home, maybe he wouldn't have become evil in the first. There was so many things she would tell that old fool if she was allowed to. There was one thing the old goat didn't predict, was the fact that young Harry would be adopted and cared for instead of the way he wanted the boy to be raised, which would have not been good for the boy's mental health at all. She was pretty glad that Cloud had a connection to the young boy before they had even met, which was better in the end for the young wizard and for Cloud in general. She just hoped it was enough to stop the madness the wizard started all so long time ago. Chapter 2. It hadn't taken long for chaos to start up in Diagon Alley as a golden chocobo ran through the small wizarding town to the Gringotts Wizarding Bank, catching a few eyes staring after the beautiful pure golden bird. Especially a half-giant who loved all types of creatures, who had never ever seen a chocobo in his life but saw in ancient artwork. The chocobo had entered the bank with a quay before anyone could even stop the creature. It made its way to Griphook's office door, pecking on said door. the headmaster of Hogwarts, who was still trying everything within his power to get the goblins to allow him access back into the Potter vaults again, and was currently unsuccessful. But when he saw the beautiful bird head toward the head goblin's office, he couldn't help but be a tad bit curious and followed after the bird, though he did use an invisibility charm as soon as he was close enough to hear what was going on inside of the office without being seen. Griphook was currently doing his paperwork to get things back in order and was close to reporting the theft to the ministry because the old wizard kept trying to get into the vaults that belonged to the Potters. Not only that he just found out that Sirius Black had been tossed into Azkaban without a trial, nor was he put under the effects of the Veritaserum to see if he had truly gotten James and Lily Potter killed. He'd have to tell the champion of the planet about this news, since it was now up to him to be involved with the Potter business, since he was only one in charge of the Potter's vaults. That's when heard cawing outside of his door, a pecking sound hitting his door as well as cawing, meaning it wasn't his chocobo but one of the champion's very own. But he wondered why he wouldn't send his own chocobo back. Griphook got up out of his chair and walked over to his door. Upon opening it, he saw a bigger chocobo compared to his very own, though it was just as golden as his own. "Aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" He opened the door as wide as could before stepping aside to let the creature into his office, not noticing the movement that walked in close behind the chocobo. Albus smirked as soon as he saw that he hadn't been spotted yet by the head goblin. Griphook glared at the noisy wizards and witches outside of his office before he closed his door to his office after making sure the chocobo was completely inside first, of course not wanting to hurt the champion's chocobo. "Now, your master must have sent you with a letter, correct?" The chocobo quad in response and turned to look at its saddle pocket bag, which Griphook took as a sign to go through the saddle bag, and he went over to open it, taking out the neatly placed letter out of the saddle before reading it. Then he couldn't help the delighted squeal from leaving his mouth before he rushed out of his office, quickly leaving the letter on his desk. Albus curiously walked over to the desk and bent over to look at the letter to get a good look at it. The creature watched him carefully as he did so, most likely could see him through the charm better than most creatures can. "Griphook, I will not write my name since you already know it, but if someone other than you reads this, then they won't ever be able to find me, which is what I want until Harry gets older. I want all the Potter vaults to be under my last name until he's of age and decides to change it himself, which will allow people not to know what the new vaults' names are. Also, I am willing to meet you in person. Just ride my chocobo and it will take you to me. His name is Zell, by the way. And if possible, I would like a vault that can keep everything intact through the planet's resets. It would be nice to be able to keep everything for once in another area without a reset destroying them, and yes, I'd like to change half my gil into muggle and wizarding money. You can also keep some to do with what you will. My gil is the oldest money, but it's still money, and if possible, allow me to accuse it anywhere in the world to be able to use it without any trouble. Before you go out to meet me, please feed Zell either melon or anything that is juicy and sweet. That's his favorite type of food. He'll need to eat because he should be starving by the time he gets there. And before you worry about your chocobo, I wanted to check why it's smaller than it should be and give it a well-needed checkup on its health. I'm gonna have a friend watch over Harry. He's still too young to be out in the cold, and I would rather not get him sick, but that's only if they are able to mind you. They are a part of the life stream. I'll see you on XX, and that will be all." After carefully reading it, Albus used the spell Geminio to double the letter, taking the original for tracking the person down, putting the copy in its place before Apparat into his own office at Hogwarts. Fawkes wasn't there right now, but he wasn't too worried about his beautiful bird and closet friend. He was about to send out his Patronus, but there was a knock on the door causing him to put his wand away. He sighed quietly under his breath and told the person with his cheerful voice to come in, and the person he actually wanted entered the room. "Headmaster, I have just received news that the prophecy had changed on its own accord. Got the news from Shacklebolt himself," Severus announced as he entered Albus's office. This surprised Albus. A prophecy just couldn't really change. It was entirely impossible. It was very unheard of. But his mind did go back to that strange bird that was called a chocobo in the letter, and then an idea clicked in his head right away. "Severus, maybe the change has something to do with Harry's adoption to his new parent." He handed Severus the letter he had taken from the head goblin of Gringotts and let him read it before he continued. "If we could find out who that person is, we'd probably figure out who they truly are and why the goblins love and respect them so dearly. Their scent would be the faintest on that letter, I am sure of it. Also, what has changed within the prophecy?" Cloud had just woken up after Zach's forceful cuddles and wouldn't let him go until he let out all his sorrow out, which he hated when Zack knew when he needed to cry. Though he being himself was such a big hypocrite when it came to telling people it was okay to cry when he himself refused to show his own feelings such as sorrow to others. Right now, he wanted to see his son to make himself get distracted for a bit before he needed to go and meet the goblin named Griphook. It would take him a few days' drive to get there, and even though in his letter he said he wasn't going to bring Harry, he couldn't bring himself to leave him here. He just couldn't leave all that on Zack's and Aerith's shoulders, especially since Aerith was still tied to Lifestream and was limited to what she could or couldn't do. Same could be said for Zack. Cloud also knew that two lovebirds probably wanted alone time since they haven't in such a long time, and so he was going to get out of their hair for a bit. But his first duty to do before he had to get ready was to leave was make a lot of Chocobo food so that Chocobo won't be starving when he gets back, and to check on that little unnatural-sized Chocobo to see if it was healthy and to see why it hadn't grown to its normal natural size. He also wanted to make sure he had enough food and baby supplies for the trip there and for coming back home, but first he needed to finish the attachment so Harry could ride Fenrir with him safely. Cloud got started making the Chocobo feed while also working on the attachment at the same time. He did check up on Harry every now and then, but the little one was in a deep sleep so it was easier on him while he worked. Harry was the quietest baby he's ever known, and he did worry about that because babies usually were loud and loved to get into things but not Harry, and Cloud needed to know why, especially because of the scar on his forehead, which he didn't like and wanted to heal it badly. But he was purely worried about it leaving a huge consequence, especially since he could feel another being had left a soul piece within the lighting scar on his son's head. He was going to ask Aerith about it when she came back to visit and find out what to do with the soul piece to see if they'll be able to heal Harry of that scar since he was still too young to even have one. After Cloud had finished the massive amounts of Chocobo feed, Harry had woken up and Cloud put most of his attention towards feeding him, changing his diaper, giving him a bath with waterproof water toys, then putting clothes on him before putting him in a special playpen designed by him personal for little Harry within the kitchen. After Harry was put in the playpen, he got back to work on finishing the attachment while keeping an eye on Harry. After a few hours, he finished the attachment, which was when he got very hungry, which was rare, and so was Harry, so he made them both peas and mashed potatoes. Cloud also made himself a sandwich, of course. While he fed Harry first, Harry kept wanting his sandwich, but Cloud refused to give him the sandwich. He had to stop the sandwich a few times from magically going towards Harry. After Harry was fully fed, the little one had gotten really tired, so Cloud took him back to his crib and put him down for a nap. Cloud let out a small yawn as he got back into the kitchen. He was a little tried out from working for hours on end and taking care of Harry, but he refused to rest. He had to check on the little Chocobo first, but he didn't want to leave the house while Harry was sleeping, so he took a break from working and started to prepare meals for Harry for the road ahead. Unlike Cloud, Harry needed to eat more than him. Cloud could go days without actually eating and needing to use the bathroom thanks to his enhanced Mako body and being infused with the Genova and Sephiroth cells that were still in his body thanks to Hojo's experiments for the 5 years after he defeated Sephiroth for the first time in the Nibelheim reactor. And also, thanks to the experiments, he was connected to Sephiroth more than anyone else, which he truly hated. He hated having the guy to be able to mess with him whenever he wanted, especially since it started the events which lead to Aerith's death. He caught himself before he got way too angry. He had learned after a while that only his anger was able to allow Sephiroth to come back time and time again. He, along with Zack's help, trained himself to get his anger to calm down quicker so he'd have to see that man less often. Cloud was very grateful for Zack's help. Without him, he wouldn't know what to do. Zack was so much like an older brother to him and wished the other had actually been his real brother. If they had been brothers growing up, like possibly, he would have had a better childhood if they had been. He didn't regret being raised into the man he was today. No one can change that. The only thing he regretted was not saving his mother that day when Sephiroth had went insane. His mother was the only person he knew of who was related to him, and he knew nothing of his father or who the rest of his family was if he only knew more. Though he did have to admit he looked way too much like Rufus and Rufus's father, President Shinra. He just had the feeling that they were his missing family or part of it that his mother had refused to tell him when she was still alive. She even had refused to see him even though she could see him like Aerith and Zack anytime she didn't want to, and that upset him a little bit. Aerith did tell him once that his mother didn't blame him for what happened that day, but he still blamed himself for not being able to save her, and her refusal to see him made it even deeper than it should have. Just as he was about to sit down on his sofa for a small break, his chest got slammed into, causing him to yell out with a mighty loud, "Shit!" and hit the back of his body into the sofa he was just about to sit on. When he got his bearings, he saw a red lion cub-looking creature with a flaming tail, who strikingly looked a lot like Red 13. Sorry, Cloud. He turned his head slightly to see Aerith running towards him with the Red lookalike on his chest, who gave out a small squeak. Red really wanted to see you after I gave him his memories back. Cloud's mind was trying to figure out what she had just said, and then it suddenly clicked into his head, causing him to sit up straight on the sofa, causing Cub to fall onto his lap. You mean he remembers everything? Even what Hojo had done to him? Before Aerith could answer, Cloud got hit by Red's flaming tail to the face. Fuck. Red. He put Red onto the floor before getting up off the sofa. Lucky for Cloud, he used a cure to heal the burn on his face completely. Why is he here? I'm pretty sure he should be with his new mother and not here. He should be enjoying his new freedom. Aerith looked down sadly at the ground after he had said that. His mother died after giving birth to him, and after 2 other cups which were normal and the others who looked normal got accepted to a new mother who rejected Red because he was very different. His father recently died by some sick twisted scientist who is a lot like freaking Hojo. The planet didn't want him to have the same experience with a Hojo's lookalike and sent me and Zack to get him before it was too late. She walked over to the small cub, picking him up, touching noses with him. So I bought him here so he can keep an eye on Harry as a pet when he goes to the wizarding school when he turns 11. Red glared at Aerith when she had said the word pet, and she just smiled at him in return, putting him back on Cloud's lap again. Red, it's only until he can defend himself without the need of a wand in the future. That made Cloud sit up straight at the said word wand. Wand? He asked with a hint of curiosity in his voice. He put Red down next to him gently as he didn't want to hurt him since he was still just a small cub who was only a month old by the looks of him but acted like a full-grown male. They are basically sticks wizards and witches use with many types of different woods and mythical creatures. Each wand is different and chooses who their partner is at the age of 11, though the wands do change owners when they lose a duel to someone else. But the worst thing which I hate about those wands is that they can be used to kill many innocent people. Not only that, Aerith's face changed from her normal expression to a very angry one. The souls get stuck inside the wands and can't get out without being hit with the same strong spell or be datered. I hate them so much. Zack chooses then and there to enter Cloud's house with a big goofy grin on his face. Hey Cloud, I bought you a gift, Zack said, all too cheerfully, throwing a weird-looking orb at him, which he caught so it wouldn't break or break anything in his house. Cloud sent a glare at Zack before turning his attention to the strange orb. It had swirly patterns and a gold ring around it. Weird. I thought it would have turned red inside once you touched it. Aerith let out an angry huff, taking the orb from Cloud and handing it back to Zack. Zack, take this straight back to its owners, she ordered clearly with anger in her tone of voice, causing Zack to flinch at the tone of voice she had used. His flinch caused Aerith's face to soften. Zack, I know you wanted to give Cloud a present, but taking things that aren't something you bought, nor what you own, isn't a good thing you should do. Also, she put the orb back into his hand, gently gasping her hands with his. It's a wizard's item called a remembrel. It only works if you've forgotten something. Plus, I really don't want wizards tracking it to here. This is Cloud's private home, protected from the resets. If wizards, without being told about this place, could possibly be very bad for everyone here, including young Harry. Zack was now horrified by what she had just said. Sorry. I'll go put this back where I had found it. And with that, Zack left, but once he had left, Aerith's face became a sad one with a faraway look in her eyes. Aerith Cloud began, but Aerith just turned her head with a soft smile on her face, shaking her head, causing him to stop talking. It's all right, Cloud, she smiled at him before turning around. I'm going to take care of Harry and you need to get some rest. Before he could even protest, Aerith was already gone. He let out a huff before getting off the couch. He was going to rest, but not right away. He still needed to check the small chocobo and now had to get something for Red to have for now until he got an area ready for Red to stay in. Red did actually have an area already due to the fact he'd stayed there often alongside Vincent, but it wasn't meant for a cub his size. So he needed an area for Red's safety until he was no longer just a cub. As he was preparing the food and other stuff for Red's temporary needs, his mind wandered towards his friend Vincent. Vincent, like him, was immortal, He was only immortal because the plant chose him, and Vincent was forced into being immortal thanks to Hojo to keep Chaos in check, but after Chaos returned to the plant, Vincent still had his immortality, which everyone in their group made theories about why that was, but agreed on the one theory where Chao's may have had a very strong effect on Vincent that kept him immortal after they were no longer fused together. Though to be honest, Cloud hadn't seen Vincent in almost 22 years. He had asked Aerith after the first few months of not seeing Vincent, but she never told him anything about Vincent, just the fact he was doing fine. She gave him no hints if he was alive or not, just that he was just fine every time he had asked her about him. After he finished getting Red's food done, he put it where Red could reach it and also filled a bowl with fresh water next to the food, before he could go out the door to go check on the small chocobo. Red had grabbed a hold of his pant leg with his mouth and was trying to get him to the couch, but failing due to only being just a tiny cub. Cloud let out a sigh, picking Red up before going towards the couch. "Fine, you win. I'll rest, but only for a little bit," he told the cub, laying down on said couch while keeping Red close to his chest. As soon as his eyes had shut, sleep overtook him. Chapter 3. Cloud huffed out as he got off of Fenrir, taking Harry out of the attachment he had built for the little one to come with him. They were at the place Cloud had made ages ago, but kept it up to date since it was affected by the world changing, since it wasn't protected by the planet like where the area he usually lived at with his beloved chocobos. Though he also needed to update it again for Harry's sake when he'd have friends over or when Harry needed a place to raise his own family in the future if he chose to have one. But right now he was going to meet the head goblin, Griphook. The other reason was because Aerith had made him go, saying, "You need some bonding time with little Harry, Cloud. All you've been doing is work, work, work since you got him. Go spend some time with him." And even Zack had pitched in with her, so he had no choice but to do what they said. He also wasn't dumb to realize something was off between Aerith and Zack as of late. They obviously needed to talk some things through to hopefully fix something in their relationship. He adored them so much and didn't want them to break up over something so minor that they could possibly break them up. He had to put Harry down for a moment as he built a crib for Harry to sleep in, which he had made it quickly. He needed to get more children items in the house so it wouldn't feel too empty to Harry as he grew up. All he had to do was wait for Griphook to arrive with his chocobo Zell. That's when he heard a knock on his door. He hadn't been here longer than 5 minutes, and he wasn't expecting anyone until late afternoon. So, he had no clue who was knocking on his door. So being who he was, he put his left hand on the base of his fusion blade and went towards the door to answer it. The night before, Severus had been notified of his latest task by the headmaster that he would be following the scent of the person from the letter to find out where Harry was and who the person was that had adopted him. Albus had been curious about Harry's new guardian and wanted to know everything about them and find out their name and what they looked like due to the new information from the prophecy. The prophecy had changed from, "The one who has powers to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who have thrice defied him. Born as the 7th dies. The Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hands of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord when the 7th dies. To the one to vanquish the Dark Lord will no longer be his equal as the course of time goes on. The Dark Lord and the Chosen One will become allies alongside the planet's chosen champion to fight against a common enemy who has tried to use them for their own selfish game." Severus had high suspicions of who the common enemy would be, but didn't say anything out loud, not wanting the old crazy bat to find out, because then it would lead to him not having a job anymore. He'd have to be careful with the path he had chosen to go down on, for if he made one mistake he'd be out of his job and thrown into Azkaban just like all the others that was on Dark Lord's side, even though he was a spy for the good side. Though he started to think that maybe the good side isn't actually the good side after being by Albus's side for so long. Severus wanted to have a chat with the person that was taking care of Harry first before having reporting back to Albus so he could see where this person stood. It was clearly obvious he was good if the goblins of all creatures respected him, and not to mention the title they were given was also a big giveaway to them actually being good by default. But Severus wasn't going to blindly assume that the person was or was not good until he cleared it for himself. But right now he was currently riding on a broom trying to track the person down, so far nothing. But the tracker spell actually started to work after he spent literally half a day and night in the sky already trying to find them. But the tracker spell wasn't working at the time for some reason he didn't understand. And it was what made him very suspicious of this unknown person. Tracking spells once activated always showed where the was unless there was dark magic involved to block the tracking spell magic, which was one of the reasons why the Dark Lord was feared so much, because his dark magic could stop any tracking spells from ever finding him. No one dared to try to, besides only those who actually tried to stop him in the war ever tried. He had regretted going against them because Lily had been one of them. He had loved her so deeply and very much still did love her with his whole heart. If he had switched sides earlier, then she'd most likely be here with him, and he could have proved to her that he could have been a better person. But she was gone now, and it was all his fault. No matter if Albus told him it wasn't, and that it was Sirius Black's fault for giving up the location of where James and Lily were hiding, since he had been their secret keeper, but even Severus knew that wasn't true because Sirius would never betray James' trust. Suddenly the broom Severus's was on stopped in midair and refused to move. This was not normal in the slightest, and Severus hated being on the broom at this moment. Not to mention, he was also in the middle of nowhere, so if he falls from this height alone, no one would know he was here to be able to know if he was dead or not. "You aren't in any danger as long as I'm here?" A female voice whispered in his ears, causing him to shiver. He looked around to see if he could see who had spoken, but there was no one around him, causing the person that he couldn't see to giggle at his actions. "You wizards are sure something with the magic you have been blessed with by the planet." Severus knew it was pointless trying to see the person at this point, since they were most likely not able to be seen by the naked eye. So, he took a deep breath in, controlling his human urges to find the source of the voice, closing his eyes so he wouldn't be tempted to look. "Though I highly doubt your words. Knowing that I'm a wizard without me saying so is truly worrisome, because you are clearly not a witch or a muggle, but something else entirely." "Dilly-dally shilly-shally?" the voice replied to him. He felt his broom starting to move on its own, though he could feel it lowering itself, but continued to keep eyes shut. "Isn't it time for you to move on with your life, instead holding on to the regret of something that wasn't your fault or choice?" This made his eyes shot open. He was now only 2 feet off the ground, not enough to kill him or evenly seriously injured, which was good for him. He wasn't going to risk his life on the broom while it was acting unusual. So he got off and looked at his surroundings. He was still in the same area, but he was in the middle of a field of flowers surrounded by a dense forest with a tree bearing fruit that looked like an apple but a different color. Severus walked up to the tree, inspecting its fruit from below. It was indeed a strange tree, and wanted to get some of the fruit for testing in his potions. Before he could even get close to said tree, he was thrown backwards, hitting his back against the ground, but not enough to break his bones. But it was most likely going to leave a mark on his back. At least Severus didn't need to go to the hospital wing or waste his ingredients to just get himself healed up. "I'm sorry, but the planet didn't want you getting to the tree yet." The voice from earlier spoke again, making him want to roll his eyes, but he didn't. "If you want to ever meet the one taking care of Lily's son, you must answer this question. If you get wrong, you won't be able to see them until Harry turns 11. Get it right, not only would you meet them, but you'll be able to see them whenever you want. Along being able to actually see me, but you won't be able to show the old crazy wizard or anyone who tries to enter your mind, or will be able to give out the location that is protected by the planet itself." When the voice spoke of Lily's name, made Severus jerk upwards into a sitting up position, narrowing his eyes at nothing in front of him. "Don't speak of her as if you knew her," he snapped, getting off the ground feeling pure anger. But the voice just let out a giggle from his outburst. "You are still in love with her, I see." The voice spoke softly towards him. "Which is good, very good." The way the voice spoke made him feel uneasy. "Would you save your worst enemy if you knew that they were in a dangerous situation?" That question was easy enough, but if he answered with a no without thinking about it first, would have mostly likely mean it wasn't the answer and would be a lie, and he would most likely would save his worst enemy if it meant Lily wouldn't be sad with grief. James may have hurt him the most along with his 2 friends. He would never hurt Lily again over James' life, no matter how much he hated him. Not to mention Severus owed James after the other saved him from Sirius Black's cruel prank that could have killed him, or even worse, could have turned him into a werewolf. So the answer was yes. Came out of his mouth with such ease, he didn't even realize he had spoken until it had come out of his mouth. "I would, even though they've hurt me in the past, I would save them regardless if I owed them or not. I would save them to save others from grief. That is the right answer, and from your heart, no doubt." The voice told him as something grabbed onto his left hand, which caused a warm feeling to go up his arm and spread throughout his body. It felt so nice and felt like home, which he welcomed gratefully, closing his eyes slowly as he felt safe for the first time in a long time. As soon as he had closed his eyes, he opened them right back up, seeing he was in a field of lilies, and not far from his view was a huge purple blup surrounded by chains and something white he had never seen before in his life. And before he could even go to investigate the blup, he felt a pair of arms wrap around his left arm, stopping him from even going towards the blup. That is something you shouldn't try to touch. He turned around to face whoever had grabbed his arm and to finally find out who had been speaking to him this entire time. And his breath was immediately taken away. The woman before him was very beautiful, even though she wore a bland pink dress with a ribbon in her hair. No matter how beautiful she was, though, his heart would always belong to Lily and Lily alone. Her eyes did much Lily's and Lily's son Harry's eye color, which was emerald green, and unlike Lily's hair color, this woman had brown while Lily's was ginger. Though she wasn't the only person besides himself even there. There was a man in black clothing with a weapon on his back. His eyes were unusual color. They were mainly a blue color, but a green swirled around the pupils. And he had jet black spiky hair and black muggle-style clothing. I agree with Aerith, touching that would corrupt your body and soul as well, unseal someone who isn't ready for redemption yet. The man in the black told him, which got him a sharp look from the woman who had her arms around Severus's arm. "Zack, not now," she told him with an angry pout before turning to face Severus again. "Now that you have passed the planet's test, you can see us, and now you have full access to where the planet has been protecting. Not only that you have rights to visit the champion of the planet as well to see Harry, but you aren't able to show or even tell their locations. And not to mention the setup fake prophecy?" The guy known as Zack proclaimed, cheerfully ignoring the woman now known as Aerith glaring at him. But he understood that he said too much but kept speaking regardless. "I should let Aerith explain all this to you too, but as things are, you must not interfere with this prophecy regardless how you feel about Harry. This is his fate alone, and letting that old man believe something different would be better for all of us. That includes us who rejoined the live stream, and Cloud doesn't need that old man to make him angry yet by using Harry for his own selfish needs." "Zack," Aerith muttered underneath her breath, but loud enough for Severus to hear, and turned to face him. "As Zack has said, we had to set up that fake prophecy, so the real changed one wouldn't be heard by Albus Percival Wulfric Brain Dumbledore that you work currently for. And we can tell you want the real one and what it says, because the champion would freak out if he knew of what it actually said, and would make sure Harry never ever goes to Hogwarts to follow his new purpose in life." As she says this, she lets go of his arm, and everything starts to fade away, including Aerith and Zack. Severus blinked a few good times before realizing he was somewhere completely different from where he was before. He was now in front of a house that looked like it needed a new paint job and was in the middle of nowhere. A Muggle vehicle was close by to the house, and according to how the ground looked like, the vehicle had just got there, which means whoever was inside just arrived not too long ago. The tracker spell was going haywire, pointing towards the house, which meant the person who he had been looking for was in there, and he looked to the sky, seeing the sun starting to rise, which meant he spent that entire time in that strange place throughout most of the night. This still had been his mission from the beginning, so he had to continue through with it. He wasn't going to be able to tell the headmaster anything besides that he had found the person the goblins loved so very much. So he took a deep breath in before slowly letting it out again, turning to how he usually acted towards his students. After Severus knocked on the door, he was greeted by a guy with blonde spiky hair and bright blue eyes with the same green color as that other person, Zack, he had met earlier. After he proved he was no threat to the blonde relaxed, letting go of his hilt of his very interesting blade. They both started to converse in the living room, learning that the name Zack had said earlier was this man's name, though he didn't tell his last name to him due to the fact he didn't trust him enough yet to give it to him, and the fact he wanted to wait and see if Harry would take his last name before he went to Hogwarts. They talked for hours about anything else that they trusted the other with currently, such as Cloud telling Severus about his nemesis Sephiroth and how he had to learn to control his anger to not bring him back from the life stream, since Cloud was Sephiroth's only tether to come back again and again from death. And Severus told him about Voldemort and his crimes, as well as the death of Harry's parents, so he wouldn't be out of the loop. But sadly, their conversation had come to a close because when the goblin Griphook arrived and had refused to speak until he, Severus, had left. So, before he left, Severus had summoned the stuffed wolf toy Sirius Black, had given to Harry when Lily and James were still alive, and left quickly to report back to Dumbledore what he could only tell the man. Severus would never admit it out loud that he felt more loyal to Cloud than anyone else he's ever worked under. And Severus felt a lot of respect for the man he only just met and now understood why the goblins would do anything for Cloud. Cloud was a true hero through and through, and he had outstanding leadership skills that neither Dumbledore nor Voldemort could have ever dreamed of having throughout their lives. After Severus left, Cloud gave the goblin a look over to study him over and get him memorized for any other time he would be meeting him, so he could pick him out over any other goblin he would meet with in the future. He brought Griphook into his living room, and they both sat down on the couch while Harry played with the wolf plush Severus had left for his adopted son. Mr. Strife, I would like to be the first to thank you for your continued service as the planet's main protector. It is such a great honor to meet a hero such as yourself. Cloud couldn't help the blush that spread across his face from being praised at his own achievements that wasn't from Aerith or Zack. No need to thank me, it was my fault that I couldn't control my anger, which kept bringing back the man that is a threat to planet. So it was my duty to fix the mess I caused more than once. Even though the first time wasn't really my fault, I still blame myself for it. If I hadn't slowed down Zack, he would have been able to live his life with Aerith instead of me. Cloud knew he was putting all the achievement he's done to save the planet from himself, feeling like he shouldn't have them. Your humbleness is greatly honored, Mr. Strife. Now let's get down to business. And with that, Cloud asked him questions that he needed answers for, and Griphook explained to him in very great detail of everything he knew. They started with how to deal with the soul piece within Harry's scar. It could be removed, but Harry had to be a bit older to get it removed, though the scar would still be there. So they planned to remove it after Harry's 13th birthday, that way Harry wouldn't be harmed for the soul's removal. Then they discussed Harry's inheritance test, which he would have to take when he was 16. Griphook even explained why an inheritance test was important. It would show Harry's family tree, as well as vaults he actually owned rightfully. After that, they discussed about Harry's godfather chosen by his parents, Sirius Black, who Cloud was displeased about getting no trial and even asked if it was possible to get him a fair trial, and Griphook told him that the goblins were going to do everything in their power to get Sirius a fair trial, even though it would take years to do so because wizards were hard-headed. Then they talked about Griphook's tiny chocobo, who Cloud learned was affected by magic, which was why the chocobo had been so small. And Cloud promised to release the chocobo after he did a checkup on the chocobo's health, which he did admit hadn't been able to do as of yet. After they finished their conversation, they both agreed to only send messages back and forth if anything else was needed and for updates on getting Sirius a fair trial. They parted ways as Harry started crying, meaning the little one was hungry. Cloud didn't know what the future was going to be like, but he knew one thing for sure: he would hurt anyone who would ever dared harm his little son.
That's the end of this book. The one after takes place during the actually Harry Potter book series. It's not done yet. I'm currently writing chapter 11 as we speak. Hope you enjoyed. See ya all soon, loves. Bye.